Hello, welcome back to the third part of our first lecture. In the first two parts, we talked about computer hardware and computer software. And in the final part, I'm going to introduce you Python programming language and how to install Python so that we can write our first ever program together here in class. All right, so why Python? As I said, there are many other high-level programming languages, such as Java, C++, C#. Why are we learning Python? So this is a perfectly reasonable question, and I'll tell you why. Because it is the most in-demand programming language in the world. So this is data, worldwide jobs on Indeed.com. So this is a website where job seekers post jobs and employers post jobs and job seekers search for jobs. And if you see from 2017, the blue shade over here, Python, number of jobs on Python was only 41,000, whereas Java was 68,000. So almost double. Not quite, but it was the difference was really significant. But over the years, when we come to 2020, number of jobs for Python and Java, Python actually surpassed Java in 2020 for the first time ever. And if you actually see the trend, last 4 years or 5 years, you'll see that Python is catching up, growing enormously. So that's one reason, because if you have Python on your CV, most likely you will find a job than if you have any other programming language. And the second reason is the average starting salary of Python staff, those who does Python programming, is the highest among all the other programming languages. So not only you're most likely going to be finding a job with Python, but also what you earn will be higher than what you would earn in Java and C++. So these are the two reasons why we learned Python. And I actually personally use Python a lot in my own research time. I think it's very convenient. The community, the online community for Python is huge. Whenever you have a question, just post on Google. You'll find online forums discussing the solutions of that problem. It is being widely used, and it is actually quite simple to write Python program. So you don't have, for instance, semicolon, you don't have the curly brackets, etc. Whereas in Java, it is actually a pain in the neck. Like you forget the curly bracket, you forget the semicolon, whereas Python, you don't have any of those, okay? All right, now that we are motivated to learn Python, how do we download and install it? So actually you can write and create Python programs using any text editor. It could be like Notepad, Notepad++, even Microsoft Word. You can just open up a text editor and write Python program. The problem is you won't be able to run it. So we don't want to write programs. We also want to be able to run the programs that we wrote. So for that, we need an IDE. What is an IDE? IDE is an integrated development environment to write Python programs. So they provide comprehensive facilities for computer programs, such as the editor, there are automation tools, debugger, etc., and the popular IDE for Python. So there are two, PyCharm and Anaconda. I personally like Anaconda, so that's why I chose it to be the IDE for this course. So what we need is, first we need to download and install Anaconda. Then we are going to be able to write our Python program. Okay, how do we download and install Anaconda? So I give you the download link. So if you're running a Windows or a MacBook or a Linux or Unix laptop, you can find the links below here. So if you actually click on this link, it'll direct you to this web page. So this is the docs.anaconda.anaconda/install. So if you have, for instance, I have Windows over here, I'll click here, and then it gives me some steps. Step number 1, download the installer. So click here, download the installer, and then follow up the rest. So you can verify your data integrity, but this is a common thing, so you can skip that or you can just click and verify it. And then after downloading the installer, double click the installer, click next. So then read the licensing term and click agree. And so just basically follow everything that is written here. And then, so 15 steps, and then you're done. So once you have downloaded and installed Anaconda following this 15 steps for Windows, for MacBook it could be some additional numbers, what you will be having a Anaconda navigator. So if you actually open the Anaconda navigator, for instance, if you're using Windows, the installer will have a shortcut for navigator, or you can just search. For MacBook, you can also do a search for navigator in the launchpad. So Anaconda navigator, when you open it, looks something like this. So you have launch here, you have notebook, etc. So you have what we are going to use is JupyterLab, this one, okay? So open Anaconda navigator and then write a program to display hello world in the console. So this will be our first ever program, okay? And I'll show you how to write it. I'll type it for you. And then we are going to talk about what we did together, okay? So I want you to follow the steps here. So click on JupyterLab Launch. So if you click there, it'll take you to a web page like this, okay? So you have this launcher, click on Python 3 under notebook. So click here, all right? And before we run, we can rename. So I'll show it one more time. Click File, and then click Rename Notebook. So I'll just write it first lecture, or maybe lecture 1. All right. So this part is where we are going to write our program. Okay. So let's go back and look at the program that we asked to do. So we are going to write a program that displays hello world in the console. Okay. This is the classic for every introduction to programming. Hello world is a classic first program for programming courses. So what I'll type in is, first I'll type in a pound sign. So this will allow me to write a comment. So here what I'll write is, so it's usually a good practice to write your name, maybe the place that you're writing it, maybe the course, 01, fall 2021. This is Hello World program. So if you have a pound sign and then that follows your name, your address, so you can basically write comments for your program. Okay, so this is actually a good programming habit to have. I won't do every step one by one for every program that I wrote. Instead, what I'll write is basically some comment that explains what this program does. So this program prints hello world, something like this, okay? And here is the actual instruction the computer in our computer program, because the comment is the computer won't run the comment. It is just there for you or for your fellow programmers to understand what your program does, okay? So the first line is actually completely ignored by the compiler. So far the computer does nothing, okay? So you can actually try clicking on run here. So if we run this part, only the comment, the computer will not do anything for us, okay? So here we are going to print hello world. It's actually quite simple. So you go print, and then as soon as you type print, for instance, it was black. When you type print, it becomes green, so that you know, okay, this is going to be something special, right? After print, open parentheses. So one good thing about Jupyter Lab is that it is automated. So when you open a parentheses, most likely or sometimes people forget to close the parentheses. And if you do that, it is actually a bad thing. The computer will give you an error if you forget to close the parentheses. So this compiler is helping us. When we open a parentheses, it closes for us. Okay, so here inside we are going to write hello world, but using double quotation marks. Again, I just typed one double quotation. The computer automatically closes it for me and leaves the cursor in between, so that I don't have to go back and forth. So I don't have to do nothing. I just open one parentheses and one double quotation marks. And then here I go, hello world. Okay. So it's that simple. And then when I run it, you see on the console here it prints hello world for us. Okay. So that's your first ever program. Give yourself a big applause. You deserved it. All right. Congratulations on your first program. And here, let's actually deep dive into what we did and how does it work for the computer's point of view. Okay, so we have this program hello world. To be able to write the program, we need to open Anaconda Navigator and then click on Jupyter Lab Launch here. Okay, and under Notebook, click on this part, Python 3. When you have it, this is how you write a program. So first, write the comment. So this line is a comment line. Okay. Start with a pound sign. And everything afterwards, after this pound sign, will be a comment. Okay. Here we wrote the statement. So this is a function or a statement that prints on console. And this one, inside these double quotation marks, this text will be printed. So whatever you write there, it will be automatically printed. Okay. And with this function, you would have to use these parentheses as well. So don't forget to open and close the parentheses, as well as these double quotation marks. They're quite important. So far we have learned how to write a program with a comment line. So let's deep dive into the anatomy of the Python program. So you have three components, okay? So you have a statement, you have the comments, and you have special symbols, right? So a statement here represents an action or a sequence of actions. So in this particular example, our statement was hello world, the print. So this is our statement. For this particular program, we only have one statement. Usually you will have multiple. So this print hello world statement displays the greeting hello world. Okay, so these are the instructions or actions that the compiler runs through. Then we learned a comment. So in the first line, for instance, this program prints hello world in green color, preceded by a pound sign. We see a comment line. So this comment explains or documents what the program does and how it's constructed. So they're not statements and they're completely ignored by the compiler. So they're basically for humans. So this is ignored by the compiler. Okay, so there are multiple ways of writing a comment. You can write a line comment that basically preceded by a pound sign. Just press the pound sign and then write on a line. That is called a line comment. And the block comment, so you can select multiple lines. So for instance, you write multiple lines and then you press Control with backslash at the same time, and then they are all going to become line comments. For instance, let's do, okay, for like, I'll just write my name, the university, and then maybe fall, the name of the course, first lecture. So I selected all of them and then press here Control with backslash. So they become a paragraph comment or a block comment. Or you can simply write a pound sign at the beginning of every line. That is also a possibility. Okay. And third, we learned special symbols. For instance, opening and closing parentheses that we use with print here. It was a special symbol. So opening and closing parentheses needed for functions and methods. So we'll learn more about functions and how to write our function in the fourth lecture. But now we are using the built-in functions that is written inside Python. Also, another special symbol is a pound sign. This one. So anything preceded that pound sign is a comment line. And then we learned opening and closing double quotation marks. That sort of encloses a string or a series of characters. Okay. So these are the special symbols. For instance, opening and closing parentheses we use in with print function, pound sign we used in the first line, and then double quotations we use to enclose the text or the string that we are going to print out on the console. Okay. So style and documentation. So usually a program, a nice and good habit is that it starts with a comment, an appropriate comment at the beginning of the program. It basically summarizes what you're doing and explaining what the program does. So this program does da-da-da. Okay, this program prints hello world. So it's a good habit to include your name, class, section, date, brief description at the beginning of the program. Another good habit as a programmer is that when you're naming something, for instance, starting from the second lecture, we are going to learn creating our own variable and then naming them. So always choose meaningful and descriptive names. For instance, at the beginning of this lecture, we see that area equals 5 multiplied by 5 multiplied by pi. So we named a variable for the area of a circle, and then we call it area, right? So that is a good naming convention. And then use proper indentation and spacing in between. For instance, here I have used, so this one, so I didn't put this right below here. I put the space. Sometimes you would need like, you also put a space here, you put an empty line here. So they're all good programming habits. All right, finally, we are going to talk about two types of programming errors. So many times you are going to experience an error. So if you're lucky, you will get a syntax error. If you're unlucky, you will get a logic error. So the reason that I said lucky and unlucky is because a syntax error is detected by the compiler. So this stops, if you have a syntax error, you cannot run the program. Okay. If you have a logic error, you can run the program. So if you have a syntax error, the program aborts immediately. Okay. But here it does not abort. So what it does is it basically produces incorrect result. So you don't know where the error is, but in the syntax error, the compiler will tell you, for instance, like line 8 missing parentheses, something like this. So you know that, oh, okay, line 3, I missed a parentheses. I'll have to go back and then correct that. So the compiler is actually helping us to detect the syntax error, but the logic error is they're more difficult to solve. Okay, for instance, I'll actually ask you now, what is the syntax error here? So if you actually go back and compare this with the program that we wrote, you'll notice that there is something missing here, and that is the double quotation. So we have a missing double quotation mark. And this is a syntax error. Let's actually do it on Jupyter Lab. So let's delete this part, okay? So I should have had this one. So if I actually run it, it prints hello world. But if I delete this part and try to run it, see, I have a syntax error. So it actually shows me which line I have the error, and it sort of points me out, okay, so it's like somewhere there, okay? So you know that you have an error at that line, and then you would have to correct it. And a logic error is going to look like this, okay? So let's actually write it and see why this is a logic error, because it's going to look like it's a perfectly sound program, but it has a logic error, okay? So let's see. This program prints the average of 3 plus 4. Let me actually start from a new box. You can have multiple boxes with different pieces of code. So we go, this program prints the average of 3 plus 4, okay? Here we have a print average of 3 and 4 is the average of and 4 is, okay? And then we have another print, and the print goes 3 plus 4 divided by 2, right? So notice that we are going to print this first using double quotations. Here we don't have any quotations. This is not the error, because we are not going to display the text. We are going to do some calculation and then display the result of that calculation. So in that case, we don't need the double quotations. We only need it when we are displaying or in outputting a text, okay? If we are actually doing some mathematical calculations, we don't need that double quotations. Actually, let me show you. If we have the double quotations at the beginning and at the end of here, it is going to print exactly the same thing. So it's not going to do a mathematical calculation for us. It's not going to calculate the average of 3 plus 4. It is going to display exactly what it is written. So if you have this double quotation, it prints exactly what it is. But if you need the calculation, you would have to delete it. So here the problem is, when we run it, let's actually run it. So we don't have any syntax error, right? So we don't have any red box like this, but it prints 5.0. But we know that the average of 3 and 4 is 3.5. It's not 5.0, okay? So why do we have a logic error here? The output is 5, but the correct output should be 3.5. So what happens here, if you actually remember from high school math, the division comes before the addition. So it divides 4 by 2 first, so we have 2, and then adds 3. So that's why it prints 5. But what we actually want is this first, right? So we have 7 and then division by 2. So that makes it 3.5. So how do we make sure that the addition comes before the division? Is we are going to use parentheses. Okay, so the correct way is using parentheses so that this adds up first and then it divides by 2. So let's correct it. I put open, so here this is going to be added first and then we have a division, right? So if I run it, you'll see the answer now is 3.5. Okay, so we figured it out by ourselves. The computer didn't help us. That's our logic error. But here the computer is helping us, saying that, okay, this is something that you're missing, correct it, okay? All right, so these are the 2 types of programming errors that you are going to face. Let's do one final review, and then we are going to call it a day, okay? So find the programming error here and tell me whether it's a syntax error or a logic error. So this one, you see it obviously, we are missing a parenthesis, and that's a syntax error. Let's actually do it. If you're in doubt, I suggest you to do it. So we don't have the ending parentheses here. See, it's a syntax error. It points out again this part. Okay. All right, so review question number 2. Find the error here and tell me whether it's a syntax error or a logic error. So you can stop the video and think about it and then give your answer. I'll tell you the answer right away. So here the error is this part. So instead of print, we wrote PIRT, so we mistype it. And this is also a syntax error. So let's see. So we have this. So we have, instead of print, we have PIRT. Okay, print. So we have this name error. Name PIRT is not defined. So whenever you see a red box here, it is a syntax error, okay? So we misspelled the name. It should be print. All right, the final review question. Find the error in this program and tell me whether it's a logic error or a syntax error. All right, again, you can stop the video and think about it. I'll tell you the answer now. The answer is here. So we misprint world. We forget an O. Is this a syntax error or a logic error? Let's see. So we can guess it. Actually, it is not a syntax error. It is a logic error because we actually wanted hello. We wanted to print hello world, but what we print is hello world, which is not the correct output that we wanted, right? So prints a misspelled sentence, so that's a logic error, okay? All right, so that sums up today's lecture. I hope you guys enjoyed it. So before you go, I'd like to thank you for your participation and let me know if anything is confusing or difficult to understand. Otherwise, you can always come to the tutorial hours or send me an email. I'll just write my email address m.m.tunc@Tilburg University.edu. Okay. I hope that you enjoyed the first lecture and I hope to see you in the second lecture. Bye for now.